Imagine living in a body that's completely free of form. That is the manifestation of spaciousness itself. And that's what we're going to explore in this 3-part series. The first part, this one, is about the theory of non-duality. And the next episode is about practicing. We don't just want to talk about it. We don't want to make it into a mental construct. We want to actually go to our own lived experience, explore it at its source. How do I live the experience of being in a body without form? And then the third part, we go in more to the juiciness. What's the benefit of freeing your body from form? What does that feel like? Why is it worth the effort? You're listening to Consciousness and Me, and my name is Josephine. Let's dig right into the first one, the theory, the non-dual theory. So in our Western world, we live under a metaphysical model, or that's the predominant one, called materialism or physicalism. And currently it doesn't explain the world as one. It basically describes the world as two different substrates, and that's matter and consciousness. And it suggests that matter is primary, like the stuff out there, the universe, and the body. And when a nervous system becomes complex enough, then consciousness erupts out of that structure. We haven't really explained how that works, but we can see that there's a correlation between a brain and a body and a consciousness. So the fact that we haven't explained how it works, we call that problem the hard problem of consciousness. And if you want more details on that, then I have a separate video if you want to watch. I'll link it below. But non-dualism doesn't do that assumption. It starts with the one, what should you say, substrate, I guess, that you cannot deny. Consciousness. That's our very first experience. Before we can experience anything else, we have to be conscious. So non-dualism starts there, and then it builds up a model of the world, and it hasn't found a reason to come up with anything external to consciousness. Because within non-duality, you can explain everything that we experience using only consciousness. And by explaining that, we have to discard the materialistic way of looking at consciousness. It's not consciousness in my brain and consciousness in your brain. Non-dualism suggests there's one universal consciousness, and I am one localization of it, and you're another one. Almost like little ripples or a whirlpool in a river. There's only one river, but there's many ripples. And the non-dual understanding doesn't discard the world. It doesn't discard the fact that there's an experience of something inside my life, such as thoughts and emotions, and then there's an outside world where something else happens. It just reinterprets the way we experience or the way we explain the world. And one of the most tricky ones to see through is the illusion of the body, because we're so trained in the Western world to assume that consciousness is produced inside our brains. But I'd like to suggest that that's not necessarily the case, or rather non-dualism suggests that. So if we want to free our body from form, we have to start there. We have to be open to the idea that maybe it's actually not our nervous systems that create our brain. It's the other way around. A brain appears inside of consciousness. And this can be a tricky one to understand, so let's linger on that a bit. The brain does not produce your consciousness. A brain appears in consciousness. So how do we make sense of that? Well, let's use the dream analogy, because we've actually experienced this all the time, that something that seems like form appear inside of consciousness. When you go to sleep at night and you start dreaming, you might dream that you are a little dream avatar. You walk around in a jungle, and You can feel, you can smell what it smells like. You can feel the moist against your skin. You can go up to a tree. You can touch the tree. You can touch the tree trunk and you get sensations. And you can, if you accidentally rub against a thorn with your finger, it's going to hurt. You look at your hand and there's blood there and there's a correlating pain. Inside of your dream, it all feels very, very real. But when you wake up in the morning, you realize that no, there was never a jungle. There was no external smells. My hand wasn't injured. It all happened inside my own consciousness. But when I was dreaming, it felt like I had a hand that was injured. But when I wake up, I realize that didn't happen. And the same is suggested for us. I am a dream avatar in universal consciousness, and so are you. So we're just bumping it up one level. When I dream, it happens inside of my localization. But this thing that we perceive as a human is just a localization within a bigger consciousness. And some people might object to that and say that, no, there is a reality. Yes, that's not what we're debating. There is a reality. But there was a reality to your dream as well. There were experiences happening inside your consciousness. You were in that dream jungle. You did hurt your dream hand, and there was the experience of pain. All that is true, but that doesn't suggest that there was any reality in the sense that was external to your consciousness. Nothing in the dream actually manifested outside of your consciousness. And the same is true for us. If you and I are localizations of a universal consciousness, then something is happening and there is a reality. I have experiences of sitting here. I feel my sweater against my skin. I can look at my hand and I can squeeze it, and there are experiences. But none of that suggests that there's anything that is existing outside of consciousness. And be aware now, because I don't mean that nothing exists outside of my consciousness. I'm not suggesting everything happens within my localization. I'm suggesting that something happens within the universal consciousness. Just like your dream avatar, the jungle doesn't appear inside your dream avatar. The jungle exists inside your sleeping consciousness. When you are asleep, the jungle exists in your consciousness, and so does your dream avatar. So there are things happening outside of your dream avatar, the leaves and the trees, but that's outside of your dream avatar's localization. It's within your consciousness. Did I invite you all the way into that dream, to how we can have the experience of form in a dream that's not matter? And the suggestion of non-duality is that we can have the experience of form in this lifetime that isn't actually made of matter. It's made of consciousness. But in order to fully grasp that, we have to let go of our ordinary definition of consciousness. Normally we think consciousness is thoughts and emotions. But in order to understand non-duality and universal consciousness and how it relates to the world, we have to allow consciousness to manifest as other things, not just emotions and thoughts. It could manifest as being outside of our localized consciousness and look like a tree. It can look like an ocean. That doesn't necessarily mean it's outside of consciousness, not if you expand the definition of consciousness and allows it to show up in different ways than thoughts and emotions. And the reason why this is a bit difficult is because when we're brought up with materialism, that consciousness arises inside of our brains, then we've kind of defined consciousness to only being thoughts and emotions or my inner world. But that's not necessarily what we have to limit it to. So if you're with me this far, then let's proceed. One of the hardest nuts to crack in order to fully embody the fact that there is no matter in the sense of solid, dense material that we are made of. It is the body, because we're so intimate with it, and it really does feel like my body is a solid entity. And here's the trick. We're not going to suggest that we don't have the experience of a body, that it's not useful to reference it as though it exists as solid matter. It's the same as in the dream. When you dream and you walk up to a tree, you treat your body and your tree and the tree as though they exist on the outside. That doesn't mean they have to exist there. And one of the absolute most difficult thing about the body being consciousness, that is when we start talking about the brain, because it's easy to slip back into the idea that the brain actually do exist. Now we have to let go of that fully. When you look into your inner world, you don't experience neurons firing. You don't experience your brain. You experience thoughts and emotions and sensations and colors, and that's what you experience. It's just that we've been trained from growing up into saying that happens inside my brain. And this is not about convincing you that it doesn't exist inside your brain. It's just opening up the definition that if you will fully want to understand non-duality, you have to let go of that phrasing. And this episode has mostly been about allowing our mind to even take that leap. If you're like me, you'll most likely want to have a rational explanation if this is even possible. Before you even consider starting to believe it, you need to know that there is something that matches your logical thinking. And this is kind of the opening that this episode was trying to give you. Yes, you don't have to let go of physics or mathematics or biology or thinking that there is a world outside of yourself. It's just reshaping how we look at the world and not take it for granted as though it's matter on the outside and that consciousness arises from this body. And if you're with me this far, then I think you want to join me on the next one. That's more of an experiential journey. We actually go to ourselves and see, where do I hold my body into form where it's actually free? We don't just make it into a mind thing. This is going to our lived experience. Like a workshop. It'll be fun, I promise.